Helps if you add yourself to the broadcast. My goodness. Trying to navigate some new software here, but we're doing okay here on this Sunday evening. Hope you guys are as well. It's region weather meteorologist Matt Wentz. First of all, if it's the first time meeting, nice to meet you. Time for broadcasts, right? Let's talk weather. We've got we're in this pattern right now. It's called, well, I've heard colleagues refer to it as the September doldrums. It gets very quiet across the U.S., like incredibly quiet. But there's some nuances within that forecast that may have some implications on our local forecast here as we go throughout the extended. And it's a temperature story. We're going to start to heat up as well. So we're going to chat all about that coming up in the forecast. First and foremost, I want to say hi to Mary. You were the first one on tonight. I appreciate that on this Sunday evening. Jeff, good evening to you. Linda, good evening to you. Maxwell's with us. Susan, hello. Thanks for joining us tonight. I certainly appreciate you guys taking time out of your schedule. I know there's a lot going on. So let me jump right into this here. Ruth's with us. Hi, Ruth. Linda, hello. And Derek asks a great question. Derek, this is a great segue for the forecast. He says, could we see some tropical rain soon? Derek, that's a great question. We're going to dive in here in the forecast. Let me thank our sponsors first and foremost, FBI Buildings. They do pole barn construction. They've done some amazing projects. Check them out on Facebook. I mean, they're just working all over the place in the Midwest. Every single day, they're building new pole barns, which are just amazing structures, whether it be commercial or residential. They've done over 20,000 of them. They do amazing work. They'll renovate one that you have. Perhaps it's falling apart that someone else did. They'll come in, fix it up, or they'll build a new one for you. It's FBIbuildings.com. Minogue.life is the place to go if you have any questions around Medicare, Medicaid. Navigating that world's just a mess. Life insurance as well. In fact, Michael does work with Women's Life and Catholic Life for life insurance. And one thing he wanted to remind you of is the fact that, you know, we prepare for storms around here by making sure our gutters are clean, making sure stuff's charged, making sure we have, you know, emergency food, emergency shelter, all that stuff, because you want to prepare for that before it's too late, right? Well, it's the same thing with life insurance. You need to make sure you have enough, or maybe you have too much and you're paying too much for it every single month. Michael will help you navigate that. He's been doing it for years for Northwest Indiana. It's Minogue.life. That is the website to go to for a consultation around all sorts of things that are just crazy to navigate. Medicare, Medicaid, there's so many new laws. It's a mess. He knows all of it. PSA, it's our public service adjusters. It's publicserviceadjusting.com. Local licensed insured adjusters. They were out at Popcorn Fest in Valparaiso over the weekend. They're just a good group of folks. If you have an insurance claim on your property, whatever it happens to be, flooding in the basement, tree falls on the house, something happens, you know, need a new roof, whatever it is, don't call your insurance agency first. Go to them first, publicserviceadjusting.com. You contact them, they'll come on out, they'll take pictures of everything, they'll document everything, and then they'll go to your insurance company for you. You won't have to do any work the entire time. They'll do anything. They're kind of the go-between. And what they end up doing is getting you more money out of your insurance agency than what you'd get out of your insurance agency. So it's a win-win situation. 5-star reviews across the board, publicserviceadjusting.com. TigerPlumbing.net, that's our local plumbers here in Northwest Indiana. Jeff and team are amazing. They've been doing some great work over the summer on a lot of residential properties. If you guys need any help with redirecting water in your house, or perhaps you have a water spigot outside that's just shooting out like a fire hose, you don't need that. They'll help you with that. TigerPlumbing.net. They also install a lot of Delta stuff, like Delta faucets and all that. If you have a faucet that needs installed, they'll do something as simple as that. If you need a whole rework of your sewer system, they'll redo that too. TigerPlumbing.net, place to go. You can do it on your phone. Finally, last but not least, Grieger's Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Valparaiso. They've been serving Northwest Indiana for decades. They've got brand new Jeeps on the lot. I know we're not thinking four-wheel drive right now, but they certainly are. Grieger's Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Valparaiso. All right, let's dive into the forecast, shall we? Have a couple more that joined here. Susan, hello. Cynthia, JK's with us. Gail, Ethan's with us. Debbie's with us. so nice to have the family here. I feel like I should have like a little picnic table spread. We all bring a covered dish. I think that'd be nice. Oh, anyway. All right, let's dive into the forecast. I hope you guys had a wonderful weekend. We had, I got to volunteer today at something that it's a big dog festival basically here locally. And it was just crazy awesome. Just crazy awesome. There were dogs everywhere. We had a booth. We were giving out tennis balls, which was cool. It's just good to see a lot of folks over the weekend. And then my son, not that you asked all this, but my son started flag football. He's in kindergarten this year. And somehow I got roped into coaching because they just need help. There's just so many kids and there's not enough coaches, right? And I don't know the slightest thing about the rules of flag football. I know real football. I just don't know flag football. So the main coach was there, and then she put me in charge of just defense. So I was basically the defensive coordinator, and I don't know the rules to this. It's a mess. And so I'm lining these kids up, and I lined them up wrong the first time, so the team scored a touchdown. And anyway, we gave up like 35 points. So I'm going to stick to meteorology rather than flag football. Thank goodness the other coach is back next week, but they just needed someone to fill in. Anyway, and I understand football. That's the problem is, like, if it were regular football, I would understand, we'd do 3-4 defense, where we'd match up, how we'd rotate, all that stuff. But this flag football just threw me for a trip. And the kids don't really react very fast either. So it was a great weekend. So not that you asked, but we had a really good weekend in our household. So I hope you guys had the same. As we're winding down the summer feeling here, I know it's kind of slipping, that sunset setting earlier. So before I dive into the forecast, just a couple tidbits. We lose more daylight in the month of September than any other month. So we're losing almost 3 minutes a day. All right. And most of that is actually coming off of our sunset. It's not equal sunrise sunset. It's interesting. We're losing about a minute a day on our sunrise, and we're losing about 2 minutes a day on our sunset. So you're really noticing that at night that sun's going down earlier. And you can see it here on our satellite picture. The sun, you see that little shadow that comes at the end? That's the sun going down. We've had clear skies here today, right? But we haven't. We've had that milky white look to the sky again. It kind of looks like high cirrus clouds. Those aren't clouds at all. That's atmospheric smoke. All right. So that's where we're going to kind of start our broadcast here. And you can see it here, this kind of just wispy, milky look that's coming down south. There's a lot of wildfire smoke out west as well. This is from wildfires burning out in this region. There's also some in Canada as well. And what happens, those wildfires will put smoke up in the atmosphere. You can smell it. It's surface-based as you're out west. But eventually it rises and it continues to rise and goes up into the atmosphere where it doesn't affect areas at the surface. And so then it goes up there and low pressures will take it. Some will grab it. Some cold fronts will bring it in and it'll swish it all over the United States. And so we happen to have this northwest flow off of what was the cold front that went by, but it's off of the wildfire smoke that went up in Canada. And then a cold front grabbed it and it's kind of gushing it in our area. So the sky's not blue. Okay. It hasn't been blue the last 2 days. We had lake effect rain, so it certainly wasn't blue then on Saturday. But what we're going to see tomorrow is kind of more of the same. We'll have sunshine, but it's going to have that milky white look to it. Now, here's an interesting map, and this is a new product, and I absolutely love this. This is atmospheric smoke density, but it shows the height of it and the forecast for that. Again, this is a new product. I love this. This is the HER model that takes it out through tomorrow night. Here we are down here at the surface. Okay, this is surface-based looking up into the clouds. And we're down here at the surface. And thankfully, all this stuff is well lofted in the atmosphere. So you're not going to smell it or anything like that. But you'll see it. And you notice how tomorrow afternoon and evening, the HER's forecasting it to get a little thicker. So we're going to have kind of that whitish look that comes over us tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening. And the sunset may be a little bit more red, right? When it goes down and below the horizon, let's say you're out on the lake watching the sunset. Well, I guess you'd have to be in like Berrien County, but either way, if you're watching the sunset, you'll notice once it gets lower on the horizon and it's going through more of that atmosphere, the sun will turn redder and redder. So it'll have kind of that red glow, and you may have actually be able to look at it with naked eyes because you can anyway, but it hurts, right? And you're not supposed to, but it's real easy to do when you've got that atmospheric smoke because it's just a red blob. That's it. So that's it. That's all I have in terms of atmospheric smoke. I thought that was interesting. The other thing you notice, I'll go back to this, down here in just off the coast of Texas, there's a lot of tropical cloud cover. All right. And that seems to be the focus. I'm seeing a lot of this on social media that we could get a tropical system this week. That's probably how Derek caught on that. And we certainly could. So let's talk about it. The tropics, this has been a crazy season so far because forecasters, not me, because I don't forecast tropics, but our tropical forecasters in the country, meteorologists, have focused on this season as being perhaps a blockbuster season, right? Because we're coming off a La Nina or heading into it. And then we've got just warm tropical waters. I mean, insanely warm tropical waters, right? But we haven't had much action yet. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the reasons is there's been a shift this year in where the tropical systems are developing. So normally they're developing right in this region off of Africa. So when I say tropical systems, we talk tropical waves, and they're not waves in the ocean. They're waves of energy that come across it's the biggest word in weather. It's called the intertropical convergence zone, which is right down here. It's where your northerly winds come with the southern hemisphere winds, and they create spin in the atmosphere. So you get storms that develop almost daily in areas of Western Africa, and they come across the ocean. And a lot of those just are clusters of thunderstorms that don't develop, but some of those develop into tropical depressions, eventually tropical storms and hurricanes. That's where our hurricanes come from for the most part. Well, what's happened is they're forming a little bit further north this year. And so as a result, they're encountering a not so favorable environment up here versus where it's more favorable down here. Several things go into that. There's some warm air aloft. There's a lot of wind shear as you get higher and higher in latitudes. A lot of things going on with that. But that being said, that's kind of put a damper on the season so far. And this is peak week. This week, next week, and the following week are the three usually climatologically busiest weeks in the tropical system, or in the tropical season, where we typically have 3 or 4 named systems out in the Atlantic. And right now we have 0 named systems out in the Atlantic. But things are getting a little bit more active, and I'm sure the media is going to hype this up like crazy when we finally get probably 2 named storms out of this. They're going to say, crazy hurricane season going nuts. And that's not the case. Don't let that fool you, because it has not been a busy season. It's typical to have 3 or 4 tropical systems right now out in the Atlantic, all named. I remember one time when I was a kid, we had 5 during the peak, and we don't have that right now. So these need to develop. They should develop because tropical systems are natural. They're Earth's way of transplanting energy and bringing warmth and cooling the waters in the tropics and bringing warm air north and bringing cool air south. It's all a natural process. There's a lot of things that tropical systems do that are good, and they're good for biological things and all that stuff. I won't get into that. But anyway, long story short, here's our system in the Gulf. Okay, that's expected to develop. So let's watch that. Where does that go? We've got a very quiet week here locally as of right now. All right. The only thing we're dancing around are a few clouds now and then, some wildfire smoke. Otherwise, we're talking lots of sunshine and a warm up this week. All right. So we need the rain. We know that. And we'll discuss that in a second. But here we go. This is the Euro model. We stay dry. I mean, look how dry we are across the northern tier of the country. There's not a system in sight. The only thing that we'll be tracking is this thing down in Texas. The Weather Channel, for example, is going to be very bored with the weather across the country. They're going to be all over this Texas junk. Okay. So if it becomes our next tropical system or hurricane, there you go. I certainly think it will. It's got a real good chance for that. And notice we're talking Wednesday or Thursday, some kind of landfall in Louisiana. Doesn't look to be a huge blockbuster hurricane, but it could certainly be a hurricane at that point. All right. And then what we do there's not much steering flow. There's a big ridge across eastern half of the country. So wherever this thing comes in is where it's going to continue to go. And all indication is that it's going to start to head our way. So this is Thursday. We would probably on Thursday into Friday start to get some high clouds off of this, some high cirrus clouds. You may not be able to tell the difference between the atmospheric smoke and the high cirrus clouds, but either way, we'd probably get some clouds off of it. And then you can see how it starts to come north on Friday. It's making it into Indiana. But watch what the Euro does. It dries the whole thing up before it even reaches us. Wouldn't that be very Northwest Indiana-like, that something fades before it moves in? And then what happens, says the Euro, is there's a frontal boundary that's trying to get in here. There's not a lot of moisture with it because this system's essentially kind of cut off the Gulf of Mexico temporarily because remember, there's a northwest flow here, so it's kind of pushing everything down to the Gulf again. But the system's here in the front tries to pick it up, and it may be the focus for some pop-up shower and thunderstorm activity this weekend. All right, that's what the Euro's hinting at, and that would be great. If that boundary can get in here with that cold front and kind of stall, and we could get several days of potential rainfall, that would really be best case scenario, okay? And that would go into next week. And then you could see we're starting to bring some action into the U.S. later next week, okay? So next week does look to be getting into an active pattern again. But until then, we're just watching the system in the Gulf. That's all we're going to be doing this week. All right. I do want to show you the GFS real quick, since it's a little bit different here. The GFS, as we go through time, brings that system in. All right. So everything agrees. It also dries that system up just down to our south Thursday into Friday. But then as we get into the weekend, you can see it has a little bit more activity coming our way. And it also develops another system off the Carolina coast that would come our way. Not saying it'll make it here or develop, but there's certainly a chance for that. And it develops another system down in the Gulf of Mexico that eventually could make its way into the eastern U.S. And this goes all the way through September 24th, all right? And you notice one thing's lacking on this. There's just not a lot of rain that crosses over northwest Indiana. There's not much at all. In fact, it just had a couple showers on one of those days between now and September 24th. That's not good. We need to start saving our water if we have well water. The other thing that we have going on is this big ridge. Okay, this ridge of warmth out west pretty much overtakes the entire U.S. at this point. This whole week's going to be on the warmer side. The ridge will back down a little bit as we get on the weekend, so it won't be quite as warm. But overall, the steering flow across the U.S. is not there. Everything goes way up into Canada. It's typical of September. September, you get some really boring weeks of weather. But boy, once things change, which they typically do around, we usually see two changes to the weather pattern. We usually see one late September getting into early October. Sometimes it's right at October 1st. It seems more often than not to be that way. And what that does typically when we get to that point is the jet stream comes back into the U.S. again, and we start to get storm systems again after not having them. And then the other change I've noticed just from experience is usually right around Halloween time. That's when we typically start to play with the polar jet, at least temporarily for like a day or two. And what we typically get end of October and early November is another shift in the pattern where not only do we have cold fronts, but we typically get our first strong cold front. And that usually comes with some real strong wind at some point, some big sharp temperature drop at some point. So really, we're getting to the point where we're going to start to develop active weather again. But it's just not this week. We're going to keep our eye on that tropical system this week. All right. So temperatures, as I mentioned, they warm up. So here you go. We're talking near 80 tomorrow, low 80s Tuesday, mid 80s Wednesday, upper 80s on Thursday. And then they kind of stay in the mid to upper 80 range all the way through the beginning of next week. And again, we're fairly dry. In terms of humidity, I'm not going to show that to you because I have a pop quiz for you. Remember last week we talked about what shows humidity in terms of temperatures, if it's high or low. You guys remember? It's the overnight lows. And so these blue numbers here, these are your overnight lows. If overnight lows are low, it means you've got dry, comfortable air. If they stay elevated at night, you have humidity. All right, because a lot of moisture in the air holds a lot of heat. And so you can see we've got still some cool overnight lows. So waking up Monday, 55, waking up Tuesday, 53, waking up Wednesday, still in the 50s. So this tells you we still have very comfortable air the next 3 days. And then that humidity starts to build. Nothing crazy, but it'll certainly feel a little bit more humid outside by the time we get to Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that makes sense because that's when that envelope of some of that tropical moisture at least is in the vicinity. So we're not going to have that dry air anymore. So everything kind of makes sense in terms of that. Last thing I want to cover here is drought. This is the latest drought monitor. I want to show you the zoomed out version because a lot of the country has had a dry summer. We've gone from not a ton of drought across the U.S. to quite a bit of it. And it's not just one state. It's pretty much from West Coast to East Coast. Some areas are worse than others, like Ohio, West Virginia here is pretty bad. Out in Montana, it's bad in western Montana. And then you have this area which has been pretty bad in western Texas, southeastern New Mexico. The plains have kind of caught up. Remember, Iowa had a really bad drought going into the summer. We fixed that, but it's getting bad in areas of Kansas and Oklahoma as well. And it's really not that great here locally, all right? We're talking across state Indiana, we're abnormally dry, so we're not technically in a drought across our region. They are east over towards the Angola area, and then down south, down by the Evansville area, dealing with some drought. But overall, we could use the rainfall. We know that. And the last thing I want to show you here, this is the last 45 days. Areas in brown and red are areas that are below average the last month and a half, all right? And when we're talking scale, you can see the browns indicating anywhere from 2 to 3 inches below average. Now, I'll take you down to state level here, and you can see it a little bit better. The last 45 days, you can see our driest counties have been Porter and LaPorte County, where we're anywhere from 2.5 to 3 inches below average for the last month. That's a lot. And then we'll go last 30 days because that tells a similar scene. Look at how much of Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, and Illinois are all below average in terms of rainfall. it's been dry, not just for us, but for everyone across the Great Lakes. So we could certainly use the rainfall. We'll be hoping that that tropical system can at least do something for us. But more often than not, what I've seen when we have a drought late summer going into fall is that we'll get out of it somehow. We get out of it quickly. And it usually comes from some kind of storm system that comes in and stalls, and we get days of rainfall around here. So that's just from experience. I do think we'll get out of this eventually. But right now we're in a dry period for sure. And we need to make sure that we are, keeping up on the watering schedule. If you're keeping your plants going, and just make sure you're, sprinkler if you have to do that. But if you've got well water, you want to make sure you're conserving it as well. So the farmers have had to do a lot of watering this year for sure. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and I'll answer your questions for you. We'll get you on your way, and I'll go to bed because I've got a morning show to do tomorrow. But I certainly appreciate you guys joining me here tonight. All right. Mariana, you're welcome. Thank you for your comment. That's super sweet. You're absolutely welcome. I appreciate you joining me. I mean, blows my mind that you guys will, spend time out of your schedule on this busy night to learn a little bit more about weather. I do appreciate it. Let's see. So what I was mentioning in terms of that was, Mariana, was just make sure you're conserving because we're not going to get a lot of rainfall from Mother Nature. Our ground level water is still great. The aquifers down below where our wells get the water from, they're still in great shape right now. Okay. But we don't want to overuse right now if we don't get rain the next 2 weeks. So just so you know. Debbie, I saw your comment. Remember, it can snow on Halloween. It certainly can. We've had some interesting snows around Halloween last couple of years. Tom, yep, still looking at a La Nina this winter. It's going to be a little bit different. So we'll see. We'll see how things end up going. Mary, you're welcome. Yes, Mary, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And so if what Mary's mentioning, Steve Zana was, I worked with him every morning on the radio side of things the last 2.5 years. He was my buddy. He's a big radio name here in Northwest Indiana. He did the morning show on a whole plethora of stations. He passed away. He found out about a month ago that maybe a month and a half ago now that he had some cancer, and he was getting some work done on it, and radiation, went through chemo. And the thing that breaks my heart is that he was better, and he was doing better, and he was back at the station finally after being off, and he was saying how great he feels, and he feels like a person again. And then he passed away at the radio station, and it was shocking to everyone. It was rough. I mean, this was about 2 weeks ago now, so we've had some time to deal with it, but it's a huge, huge loss for our community. For Adams Radio Group, and on a personal level, he was my buddy. I would talk to him more than I talked to a lot of people in the morning. I mean, we'd record radio stuff, we do live feedback and chit chats, and after that, we would just talk for like 15 minutes every single day. So anyway, so Mary, thank you for that. Certainly appreciate that. Mark, best days to be out on the motorcycle this week. Gosh, all days. It's going to be great. It's going to get a little bit warmer, Mark, but there's not a lot of wind to contend with this week. We're dealing with just warmth. That's it. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are going to be your best days in terms of humidity. It'll start to get a little bit more humid later this week, but you've got a great week out there for sure. Susan, a lot of the corn is going to start to get harvested. And as soon as it does, that's a great question. She's asking about the corn sweat. As soon as it does, that corn sweat goes away, which is interesting. And the corn crop it's not sweating as much anymore because we are getting later in the season. A lot of the tassels and stuff like that are starting to churn kind of that tannish brown where they get all crumply for Halloween, So our corn sweat days are mainly in August, which is interesting. They can go into September a little bit, but we're going to start to deal with that less and less for sure. Kind of neat. Let's see. Yeah, Susan, for sure. Yeah, Linda, you saw that too. That's great. Let's see. Maxwell says, I've noticed after we get a derecho, we get dry for the rest of summer into fall. Before the derecho, we did. Maxwell, it was interesting how that pattern did change. And I've noticed that as well. That's not always the case, but you have to think about it the other way too. We get derechos when we have a very active storm pattern, right? So it kind of goes the other way around, where it's not the derecho that causes the dry weather, it's the stormy pattern that causes a derecho. So it's interesting, and that's how things go. Things get active, things back off a little bit, and a lot of that has to do with the jet stream. The jet stream will be zonal, And then eventually it'll start to get wobblier and wobblier, and eventually have, big undulations in it, and then it'll go back again. So it's real fascinating. And you just never know with weather. That's what I love about it, is it really is unpredictable. We can't tell you exactly what's going to be happening, as we go through time. I can tell you 10 days out, but outside of that, we can just look at models and hope for the best. So kind of interesting. All right, everybody. I think that's it. Ethan says, look at the snow in southern Canada. Yeah, they're getting snow in northern Canada pretty good right now, Ethan. That snow eventually is going to lay down that cold air and allow it to come in here. So we'll see what happens. I don't want to talk snow yet. I know we're not too far off. It blows my mind that typically we're September 8th right now. We've had snow as early as a month from now. Nothing that sticks, thank goodness. But a month and a half, we could be talking snow. That just blows my mind every year. It doesn't even seem like we're close to it right now. But those big changes are coming. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're losing daylight, and we're losing it fast. So we're not warming up as much. And eventually that'll catch up. So kind of interesting. Ethan, that's a good question. Ethan asks, do you think we're done with the Ring of Fire patterns? Ethan, I do. I do. September typically doesn't bring that. That's usually a late June, July, into August thing. September starts to bring more cold fronts. And so I do think we're done with that pattern. I think what we need to turn our attention towards now, Ethan, is any powerful cold fronts that start make their way in our direction when we have that heat and humidity around. But they should be pretty quick sweeps through here. Okay. All right, guys. I appreciate that. Linda, thanks for wishing me a good night's sleep. It's always tough on Sundays to get back into it. It's interesting when you do the morning show. We're up so early, and it's, Friday night, I'm like ready for bed. I try to hang out, with my wife, to actually hang out with her. And I'm like so tired, so I usually go to bed kind of early Friday night. And then Saturday, it's like I'm feeling better. And then by Sunday, like right now, I feel normal again. All the morning show folks do. We all feel normal again. It feels great. And then we have to go to bed and wake up really early in the morning. So it like throws everything off. It's just such an odd life. It's such a weird pattern. So that's it. All right. Thank you, guys. You guys have a good night. Ethan, I'm going to be done answering questions. You don't want to tire me tomorrow morning, okay? I don't know if there's going to be a blizzard this winter. No one knows if there's going to be a blizzard this winter. One can only hope we get some kind of big storm like that. We'll see. So, Vince, thank you very much. God bless you too. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you soon. We'll keep you updated this week on that tropical action, okay? All right. Stay tuned.